Minas Tirith is one of the most instantly recognisable places in Middle-earth, but what is its history? How did it come to be built there? And what happened to it after The Lord of the Rings? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover The Lord of the Rings in full, as well as other great fantasy worlds like A Song of Ice and Fire and The Witcher. If you like the sound of that, there's a subscribe button around here somewhere. The first thing to say, just to get it out of the way, is that the Minas Tirith we are talking about here is not the only Minas Tirith in Middle-earth history. There was another one, built by Finrod Felagund, Galadriel's brother, back in the First Age of Middle-earth. That was a watchtower, and Minas Tirith literally just means watchtower in Sindarin, on an island built to protect the pass of Sirion. It eventually fell to the forces of evil, and Sauron used it as his base for a time, where it played a crucial role in the tale of Beren and Luthien. But like the rest of Beleriand, it was flooded at the end of that age and is no more. So if you ever read the Silmarillion and found references to Minas Tirith back in the mists of time, that is what you were reading about. The Minas Tirith we know was first constructed at the end of the Second Age. Numenor has fallen, Elendil and his sons have escaped to Middle-earth and are going about building their own kingdoms there. The southern kingdom, Gondor, was to be a jointly ruled kingdom, it was decided. Isildur and his brother Anarion would sit side by side in the new city of Osgiliath, astride the mighty Anduin River. But each would also have a smaller castle to themselves. To the east of Osgiliath, Isildur built Minas Ithil, known as the Tower of the Moon, and to the west, Anarion built Minas Anor, the Tower of the Sun. They were intended to be counterparts, and each housed one of the 7 Palantiri that Elendil's family had managed to sneak out of Numenor. The largest stayed in Osgiliath, of course. It is Minas Anor on the west that would eventually become Minas Tirith, and originally it was little more than a small fort on the top of Amon Anur, that's the lofty hilltop that Minas Tirith was built around, and its primary initial purpose seems to have evolved into guarding the Rathdainen, the tombs of the kings and stewards. Fast forward 100 years or so, and we reach the events of the last alliance of elves and men, and Sauron's downfall. Anarion died, and in his memory, Isildur planted the White Tree of Gondor in Minas Anor. That's the second White Tree of Gondor for those keeping count. The first, grown from a fruit Isildur rescued from the White Tree Nimloth in Numenor, had been in Minas Ithil, though that fell to Sauron and was lost. Isildur again managed to escape with the sapling so a new tree could grow. Isildur died a year or so later, as we know, losing the ring in the process, and Anarion's descendants then ruled Gondor alone, but still from Osgiliath, until the year 420 of the Third Age, when King Osterher expanded Minas Anor and developed it into a small city. It was still very much the second city of Gondor, but now the kings resided there every summer, and for 1,000 years that remained the situation. But then came a series of disasters for Gondor, which ended the Gondorian Golden Age. The kin strife of the 1400s, which led to the burning of Osgiliath and the loss of its Palantir, the Great Plague in the 1600s, which devastated the population, and the attack of the Wainriders in the 1800s. The cumulative impact of these forced Gondor to slowly abandon Osgiliath in favour of the much more defendable Minas Anor. The king's official residence moved there in 1640. It grew as a population centre, and its fortifications were strengthened, with the first White Tower being built there in 1900. The final shift to the fortified city that we know happened in the year 2002 of the Third Age. Gondor had been keeping a close eye on Mordor, lest Sauron returned there, but these repeated tragedies had forced them to grow lax and abandon most of their watchtowers around Mordor. Eventually, the Nazgul recaptured Minas Ithil, Minas Anor's twin and Isildur's old home, and made it their fortress. It became known as Minas Morgul. In response, the Gondorians renamed Minas Anor Minas Tirith, the watchtower, or in this context, the guarded city. From now on, this would be their fortress. From this time, the stewards ruled Gondor, and over 1,000 years we have an ongoing story of the land being harried from all sides, but mostly standing firm. Minas Tirith was the effective capital and focus of the realm, and over time its defences were constantly being upgraded, in particular under two stewards named Ecthelion. The first Ecthelion rebuilt and improved the White Tower. The second strengthened the defences markedly. It was that second Ecthelion, Denethor's father, who was there when Aragorn spent time at Minas Tirith under the name Thorongil. So the Minas Tirith we know, with its distinctive design, did not emerge in one go. It slowly evolved from a simple watchtower to a second city to a fortified city. As such, we don't know exactly when each of the elements of the design were put in place, though we can make educated guesses at some. In particular, the top and bottom of the citadel are probably earliest. The entrance to the Rathdainen, where the tombs of the kings and stewards is on the 6th of 7 levels, and the white tree is planted on the highest level, and both seem to have been there from not long after the city's founding. And the outer wall, right at the bottom, is, we're told, black, in contrast to the white of the rest of the city, and made from the same material as Orthanc. Now, we know from Orthanc that the technology to make and manipulate that kind of material had been long forgotten by the time of the Lord of the Rings. It seems to have been something brought over from the high technology of Numenor, then lost. So that outer wall also seems to be early. The fabled Great Gate, made of iron and steel, is through this wall, so presumably also dates from that time, though it may have been replaced a few times. In my mind, there's no reason to doubt that the defensive structure of the main road that passes up and through Minas Tirith, zigzagging from left to right through various reinforced gates at each level, is also relatively early. It's a strong but reasonably standard defensive setup. The later built parts of the city are therefore the main dwellings, inns, shops and so on, the middle layers, which will have grown up as the city itself expanded in function from watchtower to capital. That, and the fortifications at each level that will have been built as Minas Tirith increasingly became the stronghold, standing in the way of Sauron's forces breaking free into the western half of Middle-earth, because in the end that's really what it was. When Boromir is bragging about the valour of Gondor at the Council of Elrond, he is bragging. He's not short of confidence or pride in his country as Boromir, but he's telling the truth. He says that, "By our valour the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay, and thus alone are peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us. Bulwark of the west." The heart of that bulwark is Minas Tirith. Sauron didn't focus so much of his attention on Minas Tirith during The Lord of the Rings because it was a pretty city he wanted to own, or even just because that was where he thought the ring-bearer was. Minas Tirith was strategically important. It was the only enemy stronghold within striking distance of his homeland, and sitting controlling access both to the coast and southern Gondor, but also Rohan and the Gap, which would allow access to the west. It also held a large garrison, a palantir, and huge symbolic importance. If Minas Tirith fell, the impact on the morale of the free people of Middle-earth would be huge. Thankfully, it didn't fall. After the events of The Lord of the Rings, Minas Tirith was badly battered but not destroyed, and the new king Elessar, that's Aragorn to most of us, prioritised repairing it. But the changes he made were not just cosmetic, returning it to how it had used to be. He made it more beautiful. The Great Gate was remade by Gimli and his companions, this time with mithril and steel rather than iron. It will have sparkled and shone in the morning light. The main road through the city was resurfaced with white marble. Trees and plants and fountains were installed everywhere, so much so that elves apparently delighted to visit. This is a significant shift. The next phase of Minas Tirith's life was not to be a besieged fortress, having to always focus on its own defences, but a beautiful city, being a blessing to the world. And perhaps most importantly of all to Aragorn, a new white tree was planted on the 7th level. The last one had died a few hundred years earlier, but now a new one stood proud overlooking the city, a symbol of both Gondor and its Númenórean heritage. It had been a close-run thing, but Gondor had fulfilled its duty in the Third Age, acting as that bulwark against Sauron, protecting the free peoples of the West from incursions from Mordor. And now, as the Fourth Age blossomed, it could start to enjoy the fruits of that vigilance. If you'd like to see more videos diving deep into Tolkien's Middle-earth, please click on the playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, the best way to do that is to click on the link to Patreon on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.